save it. Yeah. So from what I can tell, Gordon Dudley is primed. He's ready. He's got his background ready, and we are good to go. So, Gordon, where are you checking in from right now?
I am in Seoul, South Korea.
Yeah. And how do we know each other?
We know each other from the Yonsei Global MBA program that we both attended in 2010-11.
Yeah. And, the thing that I do with the show is like, really, we want to get on some sort of conversation. And I know that we have plenty of things that we can talk about. We could find many different threads, but if it happens to go in a direction that is not in an intention, that's also part of the experience. So I
like
imagine
that. I like that.
Yeah. And you and
Sense
I,
of the unknown.
well, the one thing I didn't do, and it'd be a little early for you to have a beer where you are Monday morning, 9 a.m. For me, it's Sunday. I'm starting my wind down, but you and I have a history of being friends. So like full transparency to people that are listening to this, you're not some person that I reached out to. Like we weren't just colleagues. You're a very close personal friend. And we're both very invested in each other, which is a primary reason why I wanted to have you. So I appreciate you starting your Monday this way.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
It's freezing cold out over here, but it's sunny. And you said you don't know what's in my drink. I mean, I'm having a cup of tea. It could be an Irish coffee.
Speaking of snow, I don't know if you've seen this, but we've been pounded with snow. And even though Texas has had quite a bit of like infrastructure issues, Memphis and Tennessee has been pretty well done. But this is by far the most snow that I've ever seen. And this is a really rare occasion where Memphis on average has been actually colder than Seoul for an entire winter.
Yeah, it's kind of an in joke for British people that our infrastructure is pretty crappy when it comes. We get some leaves on the train line, and all of a sudden the trains can't run. But watching the news in coming out of the US, yeah, the whole of the South, big deal from this latest cold snap.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, but the thing is that in a way, I was already prepared for it. For example, we've been put on a boil water ordinance, which is pretty uncommon because Memphis has some of the cleanest water in the world for drinking water. So, and people are like, do you know how to handle the cold? Do you know what to do when it gets really cold? I'm like, yeah. One winter when I was in Seoul, it got down to negative 30 degrees Celsius. Like I'm good. I'm privy to the whole being cold thing. I understand the drinkable water versus non-drinkable water, why we buy bottle during these times and all these things. So I'm glad you're safe. I know that Korea, has been this is generally related. You've been locked up. It's been coronavirus. I imagine we'll talk about work and how that's changed in work. Gordon works in basically like HR. Can you tell people about what you do?
Sure. So this background is related to what I do. So I run a company called RDI, which stands for Research Direct International, and what we are doing is trying to help people work better. And so basically, what that means when it comes to actually providing any kind of service is within the realms of HR consulting. We're doing recruiting. So we do a lot of recruiting for global companies in Korea for Koreans. And we also do a lot of professional development or training of that kind of thing when it comes to actually more on the softer cultural side of companies and helping people to be leaders to be more effective, people to be more productive.
So what did that look like pre-pandemic? How did you execute your business? What did that look like day to day?
So that looked like primarily a training business. So that means a kind of in classroom, corporate education, corporate training kind of business, where we would run workshops, whether they are day long or several days long or extended programs. That was our main core business. And on the back of Korea changing its HR regulation, partially around the working week, but also in the status of contracts, companies were increasingly less inclined to do that kind of training and less able to get people together for that kind of professional development. And so we were kind of scratching our head about what's going to happen, and what do we need to change, and what's happening. And things were not going great. And then bam, global pandemic comes around, puts a real kind of hammer on that side of the business. Everything went into kind of freeze status. All decision makers in companies, wait and see kind of mode. Obviously, in a practical sense, nobody meeting for training because large groups were kind of banned and restricted, and increasingly people working from home. Therefore, they're not in the office to have that. And so that led us to focus much more heavily on the other side of the business, which I mentioned, the recruiting side. And so if you just think about how that service is delivered, it can be delivered 100% virtually, right? There's no requirement to be meeting anybody. We conduct interviews online, candidates conduct interviews online, and we interact with our clients also just on a virtual basis. And so that put us in a kind of new direction and ability to be able to ramp up that side of the business when that other side was just on total kind of stop.
Yeah, definitely. And so you've transitioned through the pandemic. It's certainly not over. What have you been learning now that you've ramped up and spent a lot more time dedicated from the recruitment side? What are you learning that companies are in need of? How are things shifting, and how are you guys filling the gap?
That's an interesting question. So firstly, I've learned a lot. I've been running my business now for 5 years. I think I've probably learned more about running a business in last year than I did in the previous 4 years. So that's one of the things which, and specifically what I really kind of realized is what's important in a business. And I think that I previously was rather obsessed about so-called kind of like building a brand and doing a lot of kind of marketing related activities which would help the brand, which would then help the business. But actually I realized fundamentally you have to have a solid sales funnel with a really good mechanism for bringing on new clients in order to have the cash flow, in order to be able to build your business, to be able to do all the other stuff. And so that's probably the single biggest thing that I learned as a result of almost unavoidable situation last year.
Yo, I'm jumping in. This is
Okay.
I'm gonna give you a super Southern ism. Okay.
Sure.
You can't put lipstick on a pig. Like, it's still a pig. So like if you're not delivering something substantial to a business, it doesn't matter what your marketing looks like. All you did was put lipstick on a pig. And so that is a big takeaway that I've learned from lots of business owners in this past year. And one thing that I took away was the amount of energy I was investing into parts of my business that weren't actually driving my dollars was very highlighted. And when people ask me what I did or what I provided, if I didn't have a very clear, concise, this is what I do, this is how I provide value, and this is what I can do for you, it doesn't matter how great my brand sound. It doesn't matter even how many eyeballs I'm drawing to my business. So I can at least relate to that. It's something that's been coming up often when I talk to business owners. So you've shifted some energy around and you've devoted it to a different side of your business. And what are you learning along the way?
So that, related to that point, that kind of cash is king at the end of the day in a small business, and that if you're not having a steady cash flow, then you're not something's not right, and so it kind of comes back to the kind of path of least resistance. that if you, for all the hustle and for all the like hard work and energy you put in, ultimately, if you are smart and sensible about the things you're doing, then it shouldn't actually be that difficult, right? I mean, things should happen, things should come. And so I think that I realized that knocking on the wrong doors and it being that hard was not because I wasn't doing it right, or I was just not doing the right thing.
Mm.
And so I, having changed that, that's put us in a different kind of position. And I think also one of the other things that kind of encapsulates that for me is not trying to be everything to everyone. I think that previously we thought that we wanted to be the best possible service to everybody that we came into contact with. And in fact, not everybody wants or needs 5-star service. And so full customization is actually not what everybody needs or wants. And in fact, simple nuts and bolts, straightforward, plain and simple, easy to understand, clear pricing is actually a very valid kind of product type to have, even if you're in the service business.
One thing that I learned about the business and health. So both you and I have a technical background in business, in that we both went to school and we did research and we did case studies and things. When I applied a lot of these ideas into the industry that I'm in, which is health and fitness, I'm learning that health and business, or health in business and health of the individual body, are actually very similar. And a lot of the principles that apply to business also apply to health. One thing that came to me when you were saying it was that there's a difference in being efficient and being effective. There's a lot of people that develop very efficient business tactics, but that doesn't mean that they're effective. I know people that can be very efficient, say, at counting their calories or their macros. Mm-hmm. But if you're eating fast food, just because you're efficient at tracking your food doesn't mean that the food that you're eating is effective for your health.
Sure.
And so those things that were highlighted double, triple. And the thing that really was highlighted is that people tend to want to pay not to think. And so if you're providing a service where you're encouraging them to find the solution with you, they want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Yeah, and that's where I was putting so much of my investment, was like, hey, let's figure this out together. And they're like, no, man, that's not why I'm paying you money.
Right.
So it sounds like you and I are learning a lot of similar lessons, just in different avenues right now. I feel you.
Sure.
I feel you.
Yeah. I mean, making it easy, like you said, is like what a lot of people need in all kinds of areas of their life. They want to make it, just easy, like thoughtless process.
So how have you made it easy for them now?
So yeah, we're in the process of that. One of the examples of that, for example, when it comes to actually literally how we structure our client relationships, is that we offer a kind of a fixed fee basis. So for rather than just working on one project, one and done, at a higher fee level with a better margin, just having a fixed fee, so that we can actually have a lock-in with that customer to work with them for a longer period of time, do more together, and that stability is what is actually so needed for a small business. All right. If I know that next month's payroll is covered and all our fixed costs are covered, then I can take a big deep breath, relax a bit, and start focusing on the longer term things to build the business, as opposed to chasing my tail, running, trying to be work 20 27 hours a day, trying to get things going just to close deals.
And really what it sounds like is you're moving away from, like, at the end of the day, if you're in business, you can be business to customer or business to business. If you're having a service, like, sales is part of the experience, but what it really sounds like you're doing is moving away from a system or a strategy that is heavily dependent on making large sales, and you're instead working on developing longer term relationships, and becoming, say, the authority for whomever. You've built such a solid relationship. You've given so many good recruits to X company or Y company that they don't even think to go to anybody else to look for their recruits. Is that really what I'm picking up here?
That is exactly what we are aiming to be, to have a strong following of clients for which we are the go-to recruiting service. And previously, we were trying to, really just go for these kind of big, if you like, trophy deals, thinking that that is the way to go. But in fact, that's the icing on the cake. And you still got to have the main cake, the sponge underneath that icing, which is the solid foundation that we're trying to build. Absolutely.
And for the most part, one yields the other, and usually not in the other direction. The imagination is that if I land a big deal, then more people want to do business with me. But really, if I develop good relationships and I nurture them over time, the more likely I am to be presented with that opportunity to have the very icing moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then what I'm kind of like, wondering now as I have a chance to reflect on this recent progress and kind of going forward to the next stage is, could I have realized this, or could I have learned this sooner, right? Was there some way in which just going through that incredibly tough first half of last year, where literally everything was on the table, everything was questionable, was that necessary to initiate that change?
I would argue, to me, yes. One of my key philosophies as a coach, and I've heard other coaches say this, is I'm not in the business of saving people from rock bottom. It's actually, some people need to hit rock bottom in their development because that's when they decide to do something different. Pain is a yield. It can yield these things that, yeah, it's uncomfortable. And generally speaking, I'd prefer to avoid it. And I'd prefer other people avoid it. But if you're asking if it's necessary, I can say it's been necessary for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. If I think about some of the things that we've done and the new direction we've gone in, there was no way that I would have initiated those changes without that level of concern, worry, risk at that moment when it was really crisis. And so I guess I'm thankful that came along, because otherwise I would have continued, trending, at that low trajectory, as opposed to, catapulting into this new direction.
And in the same breath of saying, like, the health of your business and the health of the individual are similar, I think a lot of individuals experienced that last year, even if it wasn't from a business perspective. They kind of were teetering along with the habits that they had, the behaviors that they were engaged in. The wheel was greased and consistently spinning. The systems were working, and then everything comes to a screeching halt. And it was like this big reflection moment of, like, okay, what have I actually been doing? What's actually effective?
Yeah.
It was me personally and other people that I've worked with, being able to take that time to reflect allows you to build a system individually, or possibly for your business, that works more effectively for you, and removing a lot of the things that don't serve you anymore, reducing energy in one direction. The biggest thing for health was, and actually this is reminding me of a quote that you told me, and I'll bring it back up. I'll close it by passing it back with the quote that you told me. I'm reflecting on a conversation we had last year when you were going through what you were going through, right around the time that I was closing Recess, the brick and mortar, and going through my own transition. So the first thing is, because so many people were going through transition, it was an opportunity to reevaluate how they were doing things. When it came to their habits, I noticed that people had work habits, people had home habits, and then if they had a gym practice, they had gym habits. And your physical environment triggers behavior. So when you go to work, you walk in that door and there's like a little trigger that goes off. You're like, here's work Brooks, and work Brooks does this, and he says these things, and he uses this tone of voice. And then I'd go home and I'd put my gym clothes on, and then I'd have my gym Brooks, and then I'd have my home Brooks. And then all of a sudden, home Brooks was Jim Brooks was work Brooks, and everything was in the same environment.
Sure.
And then those triggers that were effortlessly guiding my behavior are now gone, and I now have to intentionally guide my behavior, create new habits, create new triggers. And what I was getting at is that once people started sitting back and go, okay, like things are different. I'm noticing that I've lost a little bit of control. Maybe I'm drinking too much. Maybe I'm eating too much. I've noticed that I need to do something different. It's time to start setting this up. They start setting up a new way of doing things. But now that people have been practicing it for almost a year, the idea of going back to a full work day, full work week, and you're like, well, it's clearly not mandatory that these things be how they are. And so this is really where I'll kick it back to you is people are just realizing that there's a different way to go about this. The quote was this: you were talking about being worried, and then you realize that the worry and the experiences has yielded this new understanding. And you were talking to a business mentor friend of yours, and he said, what, is this your first downswing, or is this your first crisis? And he said it so matter of fact, like, your first crisis, like there's going to be more of this to go. So using all of that as context, like where do you think the future of your business is going, and how can you then use this crisis to propel you into the future?
Sure. Sure. You're absolutely right. This inflection point for so many people, I think, whilst in terms of the habits, definitely can be a good thing because those things are embedded. But I think also there's still a lot to be decided. There's still a lot to be defined, and that is, the very interesting part of my business, which is, the future of work. Looking at what it actually is work. This thing which people spend most of their life doing. A lot of people don't realize, when they actually think about how they spend most of their life, they spend more time working than sleeping. They spend more time working than with their friends, family, eating, all of those other necessary things that we do. And yet you don't really, you don't get to choose most of your colleagues, or most people don't get to choose most of their colleagues. And we have a rather strange entry process into something that we're going to spend so much of our life doing in the recruiting process, the onboarding process of new employees, where as a potential employee, you meet just a small handful of people, representatives of the people of the company, those who might be best placed to present the company in the best possible light, those who have the highest interests to kind of sell their company to you as they try to attract you as talent. And so, and then you get into the company and you find, well, it's not quite what they said it was going to be. Things are a little bit different. I'm not actually going to be working in that area. I'm not going to be doing those things. I'm not going to be interacting with those people. And that creates a lot of kind of disengagement, right from day one. They say that famously that the highest point in anyone's motivation or engagement with work is the first day, because it's never higher, because from day one, it's just descending from that. And I think, unfortunately, that's broadly true. And so when we look at what's kind of happening in terms of the future of work, then, people are, like you said, realizing that it doesn't have to be a 5-day 9 till 5. And so that has been quite tough for a lot of companies because they felt that time management, the management of clocking in and clocking off, was an important thing that they had to monitor and check on. And so that has changed a lot. And also we see more and more companies adopting the 4-day week, and even seeing a rise in productivity because people are working less, but they're working more effectively. And so this is definitely an area that we would like to kind of go into more, that we would like to help companies kind of transition in this change, because it starts with, it's already happened with people. They already feel this, but what hasn't yet changed is the leadership. And so that's where we come in to perhaps help the leadership navigate this change and maybe look at new ways in which they need to be managing their people and their companies.
And there, in a free market, there is already starting to be competition with inter-competition between industries, and then even within industries, inter-competition about the conditions of work for employees. Tech is one that has adopted this pretty early, right? Like the Googles were making the fancy hangout environments and the rec centers, and it was still like this is your bubble, this is where you come, but we want to make it more fun. We want to show you that we're invested in getting away. They offered some time for free creative thinking and thought. And those are the same companies that are adopting, for the most part, these more flexible work environments, remote working and things. I also happen to come from an industry where, just by virtue of the industry, it kind of goes against the traditional norms of what work looks like or what a profession looks like. And there have been professionals in the fitness industry that were very early adopters of virtual and remote coaching. And so they're living in Bali, or they're living in Tulum, or they're living in Greece, and they're serving people all over the world. And what I know to be true from studying with you at Yonsei is that the established companies are typically the last to try to make this change, because they have a vested interest in keeping the game the way that it is. But this is one of those circumstances with COVID-19 and all of the all the extra secondary, tertiary effects of this, where they can't hide or put a shadow over the game anymore. All of this has come to light. The data is the data. Companies are seeing, like you said, productivity go up despite all of the changes. There's still lots of opportunity. So what do you imagine, besides your work specifically, like what are some of the things that companies need to be looking out for, individuals need to be looking out for, and what is the landscape shifting like?
So I think one of the summaries of that is that people have realized that work is not a place, it's something you do. And so that has if we think about what work meant, then it meant going into a major urban hub, a central business district, where you are dressing up for that, and you are then in a hyperdense, kind of commercial district, probably in a high rise, clustered with many other companies and related services. And I think what we can see is that the sheer necessity for companies to have multiple stories of the most expensive real estate in the city center is increasingly up for question, and perhaps even not necessary at all. And so when you think about what that means, whereas city centers, these urban hubs, have been the absolute centers of everything for pretty much forever, right?
The Industrial Revolution, at least.
Sorry?
I said the Industrial Revolution, at least.
Right. You talk about market towns and the origin of trade that happened, usually at a major point on a river to facilitate that trade, and then markets spawned, and then there was some, economies of scale and benefits of being co-located. And so that has manifested itself into the major global hubs that we all know. But now companies looking at the fact that at the moment within lockdown conditions that pretty much all of their employees are not in the office, and even if those lockdown conditions were removed, that a significant proportion of those people could stay working from somewhere else on a permanent basis. And we've had some major companies already say, we are introducing this on a permanent basis. We're not, work from home is now forever an option for our employees. Then there are instant and massive savings that companies can make. And the single biggest driver of any kind of company's action is always cost, right? And so if they are looking at saving millions of dollars in rent on an annual basis by having their people not coming into the expensive city centers, then that's going to mean massive changes to the very fabric of our societies. It was very interesting to see that the industries which most easily transitioned into this status, this enforced status, work from home status as of last year, were of course the service economy and the modern new digital companies, especially e-commerce companies, tech companies, because they already had the infrastructure to be able to do so. And so not only were they the ones most able to kind of benefit from it, they were able to do it in the quickest way. And so whilst other companies still a year on are really struggling with how to kind of transition and how to get back to previous levels of productivity, others are just taking the next leap to get even more effective in that way. And so that's perhaps maybe the worrying sign, or the thing that we should be aware of, is that there seems to be some kind of isolation of the two extremes, polarization of certain industries and certain sectors, those who have been able to make the change and those who have not, and consequently people who are working in those industries and those who are not. And so that's something that is very interesting, because to a certain extent there's a trickle down that can happen, but at the same time there's a lot of people who are being left out, and that is and should be a concern for society, that if we have a polarization of people continuing to work as effectively as they ever have, earning as much as they ever have done before, whilst others have literally been cut from their means of any income, then this is going to have some major implications.
Definitely. When you were talking about concentration in big cities, a lot of it had to do with access to talent. So primary reason for a New York or a San Francisco or a London or Paris, it was a hub where there was a collection of talent, and that was the resource that they were essentially mining, in those places. And what you've seen is that those cities specifically have been the hardest hit from a real estate perspective, because all of the people, I went to San Francisco on my road trip last year,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a literal ghost town. And I don't mean just because there were people that were locked up inside their homes. It's because people were fleeing the inner city by the tens of thousands. People were fleeing New York, similar situation. And what it made me think as a Memphian is that this is actually, you were talking about redistribution of some kind. This is a huge opportunity for a city like Memphis that already has precedent with Fortune 500 companies, FedEx, ServiceMaster, International Paper, and of the like. To also, there was a Korean company, the Hyosung Group, brought a heavy metal manufacturing facility. They're going to bring 1,000 jobs. That Memphis is becoming a city that seems to be primed to take advantage in that sense of the redistribution and the transition period that's happening, because the real estate here, I mean, when you tell people how much I paid to live in the house I was in, and they'd say, mate, I can't get that for a tiny little flat anywhere in the city, you know? So there's a huge opportunity there. But this, to your second point, these conversations about the split of people, that the industries that can accommodate the change of landscape and can't, this is actually not new. And what I have been trying to highlight to people is that what we're seeing highlighted through COVID are not new issues, but accelerated ones.
Sure.
And so things are getting accelerated because of this thing, which to a degree, despite the death and the fear and all of the things that have come with it, we needed these things to be highlighted and pushed in our face to take action. And so it's been, in a way, you're seeing a fundamental split that is happening, not just like, yes, there are industries that can take advantage of this and there are industries that can't, but there are people that are now questioning how do we and how can we take care of this group that is being essentially left out? What can we do, whether it's creating government programs that are educating the next flight of people into a more technical education system and all those things. Sticking with the companies that you've been working with, what are their, like, what do they seem to think are their biggest challenges now that this is kind of shaken out? And since we're projecting forward on what the future of work and living might look like, what do they think is going on? What are they proposing? And, like, again, what are you guys doing to prepare them for such a transition?
I have one client that we've been working with recently. They are one of the world's largest wine, liquor, and spirits producing companies. And what they have been doing when it comes to their sales and marketing side of their business, as a response to the recent changes that we've seen over the last year, is that they, of course, have realized we cannot hold events, customer events, like we used to. We also cannot do sales meetings like we used to. And we cannot have these kind of brand, fan events where we use celebrities and, or other, attractive elements in our marketing to have any kind of event or other kind of physically co-located thing going on. And so what they've realized is that of course digital is there, and that's that, they've been doing that, and that's still part of it. But in specifically how they kind of actually being agile with their business is that they are going actually further up the hierarchy of their customers. So they're going from a kind of premium segment to an ultra premium segment in how they are reacting. And the way in which they are doing that is providing a much more relationship-based, customized type of approach to, whereas previously they might have spent significant marketing budget on much more mainstream type of marketing activities. They are getting a lot more targeted in who they want to market to and who they want to sell to. And so, it in some sense, from a recruiting perspective, it dovetails really nicely into a book that I've been reading recently, which is No Rules Rules. So this is the most recent book by the founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, co-authored by Erin Meyer. And in that book, they talk about talent density. And so talent density is basically all about the concept that if you have one superstar, one really high-performing person, they are multiple times more effective than multiple mediocre people. And so, rather than having 3, 5, 7 mediocre B players, you can have one A-star player and pay them top of the market in order for them to actually be able to achieve as much, if not more, than all of those people. And so for this company, it's the same concept when it comes to their kind of marketing and positioning, that they are now being a lot more kind of targeted and focused on what they are kind of their approach to market.
This is continuing to highlight the fact that there's a split happening in the marketplace where some people are getting paid and paid well because they're able to be effective in this new climate, so to speak. And there are people, those B players, in the case that we're just calling them B players, it's just from a nomenclature perspective. There are lots of hardworking people that work in other industries that are impacted by this. And while I definitely understand that this is highlighting a shift in economy that is probably not going to turn around, it's also going to go back some. Meaning, like, eventually we're going to be able to go back to certain things, certain jobs are going to be able to return because it won't be unsafe for people to participate in face-to-face interaction, say 2 years from now or 3 years from now. But this prompts the question. So in the States right now, there's a huge divide politically and philosophically even. But from a philosophical perspective, there's a lot of people that are desiring something like what they call a UBI, or a universal basic income.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on that explicitly? Because I'm imagining, again, like you said, what can we do to prepare or help people that are being left out of this shifting economy? I've taken a more pragmatic, and there's a lot of people that will argue like, oh, well, if you just give people money, they're just, they're not going to want to do anything. They're not going to want to try to contribute. And I haven't personally found that to be true, but maybe you might know more, given your experience, about other types of measures and things that we could consider to combat this shifting landscape.
Well, I mean, in a kind of company perspective, we don't deal directly with that type of occupation, but I think it's clear that one of the things which keeps people at a kind of restricted or lower level is debt, and I think for me, if you can find ways to alleviate the burden of debt, then I think that as a society we can be better together. All all of us can be better. So I think that if there can be a bit more regulation in terms of the provision of loans, the provision of excessive, interest, and especially to less educated people, to vulnerable people, people who might not understand the ins and outs of what the contract that they're signing means, and that perhaps that we can, through better regulation of that, protect people from getting into that cycle of debt, then I think that we definitely would be able to create a better society. I think that so many people are living paycheck to paycheck, and that's because such a significant proportion of their wage is going on servicing debt. And I think that, I remember when I came out of university in 2005, and I think as a consumer, you can actually see there's like a kind of cycle of how easy it is to get loans. How many adverts are on TV at any particular moment for 0% interest and car purchases, etc. So you can almost kind of feel how available debt is, and how easy it to sign up. And so I, at that point, graduating from university, was offered a lot of loans from my bank at the time, on credit cards and such. And I definitely thought, wow, if I was, because I'd studied business, so I just come out of 4 years of studying business, so I was very aware of how the whole system works. But I really thought, like, I definitely find these promotions very attractive, and it would be super easy to buy a ton of stuff right now, because human nature is, you get it today, and you worry about it later. And but then that having got into those deals, into those agreements, that if I couldn't then have a decent income to be able to pay off those loans, that would be really quite a burden and an ongoing difficulty. And so I think that would be one way that we could do that. And so I think, for example, in Korea, they are stricter when it comes to television advertising of what are they called? Same day loans, payday loans, this kind of instant cash type of business, the kind which has the highest level of interest. And so, whereas I know that is a much bigger industry in the UK, it's probably an even bigger industry in the US. But here, their decision is that having those kind of adverts on TV for the masses is not good for society, and so they strongly restrict them. The services still exist, business still goes on, but in how it is presented and how it is positioned, they control it a bit better. That's not to say that the overall levels of consumer debt are necessarily less here, but yeah. I do think that it is, when you bring it down to the micro level, can be helpful.
I think you're really hitting on a point that, especially, like, governments have a responsibility to protect their citizens, not to make decisions for them, but to curb as many of the incentive to try to loop people into things that aren't good for them. In the United States, it did take a few decades, but we don't allow for cigarettes to be advertised. There's certain types of products that are no longer available to be advertised in a certain degree. The thing that's been unprecedented compared to anywhere else here in the States has been the amount of pharmaceutical drugs that we advertise here. And if I do feel any type of way about it, is that not to say that those drugs shouldn't be on the market, but yes, there's clearly predatory intentions to a degree for certain pharmaceuticals, and compared to other places in the world. And full transparency, the majority of people that'll listen to this show are going to be from the States. They may not realize that this is unusual compared to the rest of the world, that there's penis enlargement pills and pills that are going to help you with your gas and pills that are going to help you with this, and they're going to help you with this one thing, but then we're going to talk really fast and we're going to on all the things that you're going to, and they talk for like another 30 seconds about all these other things that you could possibly get. But like you said, I think the big misnomer here is that everyone that makes a decision is well educated about the decision that they're making before they make it, and that's just factually not true. Even very well-educated people and people who know are still very enticed by these elusive deals that feel like too good to be true, or I might miss out on a special opportunity. That if you are not educated on these things, that it is becoming a legal and moral a moral and ethical issue, if not a legal one. If you're okay with it, I want to transition and talk about some fun. Can you do that? You ready to do that? So we've we have gone through a massive transition. And Gordon, by your own admission, you had a tough year. How did fun fit into your life? What do you do for fun? And how has that changed for you over the course of, say, your last, 5 years since you started your business?
So the last 5 years of running my business is also the first 5 years of having kids. So I now have 2 kids who are 6 and 3, and I think that previously, before I had the responsibility of 2 kids and the responsibility of running my business, fun for me was definitely mostly a physical one with sports. And I spent a lot of time, most of my weekends, playing sports, team sports, as well as individual competitions. And that is probably the biggest change that has come from running my own business. And for those who run their own business, that you know what it is, that in your mind, even though it's 8 p.m. on a Friday, you've already worked all day. It's the start of the weekend, but it's very difficult to switch off. And so day and night, it's always there. It's always on your mind. And so that was kind of one of the big changes. And then having kids, my time dedicated to them. So my kind of what I enjoy and what I consider fun has definitely changed in the last few years, to be less about me and more about others. Because if we look at the business, then it's pride in what we are doing, in helping people find new jobs, in people having great experiences to change their mindset and learn new things, and also internally, with our team, that I have people who are doing great projects, who are kind of going above and beyond, and that definitely really is fun to me, and it really kind of gives me a kind of moment of wow, this is what it's all about. But then when it comes to more kind of personal fun, the last year, as my daughter was previously going to school, and all of a sudden she's doing homeschooling and I'm working from home, actually led me to realize that spending time at home together, as opposed to just trying to work harder and to work more, to be more successful, to create a better future, that spending time together is one of the most precious things that you can do, especially with kids, because they are that age, and for them their time horizon is so different to ours. In the sense of we think that, we can get around to something next month, perhaps. For them, they're looking in minutes and hours, and the thought of even doing something tomorrow is already so far in the future they can't even kind of comprehend that. And so that is definitely something that realizing that this is an opportunity to spend time together that I otherwise wouldn't have had, to be able to pick up the kids from school more than I did before, to be at home and play with them, to have more time with them has definitely been fantastic over the last year. But I think also the one last thing that I would add to that in terms of fun, I also have learned over the last year to look a bit more about my own mental health, I would say. And so I have tried to get a bit more, strategic is a strong word, but consciously aware about my mental energy. And so I have also been able to have fun in dabbling with meditation, in looking at how I kind of manage my energy and divide my time to be able to be a better kind of person. And I think that probably means a more fun person, because I think when I'm super stressed with my business, I've got this kind of dark cloud over my head. I'm literally physically burdened by the stress of running the business. But when I don't have that and that's gone, I am more open, more energetic, more lively, more talkative, and more of the person that I hope that people think I am all of the time. So yeah, that was a full chronology of my definition of fun over the last few years.
Well, what you'll find, and what anybody that finds himself in that cloud, so to speak, will find, is that usually when you're there, you're living in the past or in the future, and you're not living in the present. And what children do is live all in the present. Everything is in the moment. Like you said, they have a hard time even forecasting a day ahead. And being able to do that is a learned behavior, because we start to learn that if I invest my time and present energy thinking about the future, that when I get there, I might be in a better position than I am right now. And that's a very valuable skill, but it's also one that's very overworked. And as adults, and that was where Recess, my gym, was mostly trying to serve, is help people out. It's not that you discard thinking ahead or discard reflecting on your past. It's that you know that there's diminishing returns on thinking about your future and thinking about your past, if that means that it's taking away from what you're doing in the present. And that is what the coronavirus has really highlighted, is that it's forced people to be present, if for no other reason, that it's like you can only watch so many shows or listen to so many podcasts or distract yourself with so many things before you get this opportunity to be present. And sometimes all it takes, like you said, is your daughter being home from school, maybe your son wanting to just spend that little extra present moment with you. You catch yourself thinking about the future or thinking about the past, and then you go, oh, this right here, this present moment is what I've been missing the whole time. It's
Yep.
happening on an individual scale, and it's happening on a worldwide global scale. Companies no different. They've been caught thinking about the past and not wanting to repeat those mistakes, and overly thinking about their future, that they were missing a lot of low-hanging fruit for how they could improve their environment for their employees in the moment. And so yeah, I think that's a perfect loop and place to, I guess, stop this conversation. It won't be the last one. If you have anything you'd like to share or riff off before we jump off the microphone, feel free to air it out right now, Duder.
One thing that just kind of crossed my mind as we were kind of chatting in this session is actually about the highly renowned and famous philosopher, otherwise known as Kanye West, who actually did have a very quite wise example of what happens to people as they are increasingly becoming adult and in the workplace, and especially in relation to kids as well. And the example that he gave is when a kid jumps up on a table and starts, puts his arm up in the air and starts yelling, I'm Superman, I'm Superman. And the parent or, the person supervising them says, get down off the table, you're going to hurt yourself. And in that moment, that kid is a superhero. In their mind, they are Superman, and they are at the top of that building or whatever they're imagining in their own world. And when we say, stop it, get down off that table, you're going to hurt yourself, then we are saying that you cannot and should not be free in your imagination and your creativity. And I think whilst that example is what happens to kids from an early age, I think it continues in the workplace. And I think that if we could just help to cultivate and support that free thinking and creativity, as opposed to stifling it and putting a blanket on it, I think everybody would enjoy their work more and would enjoy their life more and might just be a little bit happier. So yeah, thank you to Kanye West for that pearl of wisdom.
And thank you to Gordon Dudley. Man, you've been a great guest. You're a great father, and to me, you've been nothing but a great friend. So I'm really grateful that you came and sat down and chopped it up with me today. Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Brooke.
much.
No, thank you. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. Thanks
Excellent.
again.
That's it for this week. See you next time.